Is this resource-rich, English-speaking nation another captured nation being controlled by forces abroad? Hey, Nick. Hey, PD. Thank you so much for making yourself available. PD Lawton, journalist, and Nick Hudson, campaigner,
Investor, dissident.
campaigner, concerned human being, right? An awake guy. I'll have all the links in the description below where people can find you on X and your incredible blog and your journalism, PD Lawton, on Africa. I will also ask all of you who are watching, please, please, please subscribe, comment, like, comment, give me the thumbs up because it helps me beat the algorithm and it's helping my channel grow. So I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so we recorded a video yesterday about South Africa. And South Africa is an incredibly rich nation with this incredibly rich resources and it's incredibly trodden upon. Who wants to start?
Well, I think it's a good idea for us maybe to have a potted history of South Africa, and I'll try and compress it into just a minute or two.
Yes.
After the Portuguese established the maritime sea route to Asia around the Cape in the 15th century, it was only really established as a fully fledged refreshment station by the Dutch in the 17th century, middle of the 17th century, and they held on to it for 150 years. During which time there was a significant influx of Huguenots who were Calvinists fleeing religious persecution in Western Europe. And then, round about at the time of the French Revolutionary Wars, there was a back and forth between the Dutch and the English, and that ended with a small kinetic campaign that resulted in the Dutch colony becoming a British colony. The British later established a colony also further up the east coast of South Africa, so called the Natal colony. So we had the Cape colony and the Natal colony. And the successors of those Huguenots who were to form the core of the Afrikaner nation didn't like the conditions under which they found themselves in the British colonies. And so they began a movement into the hinterland of South Africa called the Great Trek, eventually establishing two republics in fairly sparsely populated grasslands. The British had no interest in that until at the end of the 19th century, gold was discovered at a place called the Witwatersrand, the location of present-day Johannesburg and the capital city, Pretoria. And they then, the Anglo-American establishment then determined that the right thing to do would be to take that gold. And so they came up with a pretext for the Anglo-Boer War of 1899 to 1902, which was also the first deployment of concentration camps and scorched earth policies. So it was a very brutal war that put a schism in the middle of the white population of South Africa, English versus Anglophone versus Afrikaners. And so that was the backdrop to the establishment of the Union of South Africa, which was concluded in 1910. And so we had this very artificially cobbled together assembly of people, containing multiple ethnic groups. I think we have a dozen official languages to this day. And 1910, the Union of South Africa, that was still part of the British Commonwealth. By 1961, the Afrikaners had outpaced the English in terms of their population growth, and the British hold on the Union became tenuous, leading to the establishment of a republic in 1961. That republic kind of solidified the de facto practice of apartheid, which had previously not been a legal structure as much as sort of a matter of lived reality. And it was really the Anglo-American establishment that fostered the predecessor of apartheid, which was the migrant labor policy, shipping people quite forcibly into the gold lands, which I had mentioned had been sparsely populated before. And that republic persisted until 1994, when the apartheid system came to an end after a vote by the white population that reform should be adopted. And in the mid-90s, the new South Africa, as it was called, or the Rainbow Nation, was formed. But it's been a bit of a maxim that has been carried out over the last 30 years. It's often been said, and I forget who said it first, that a multicultural nation can have stability or freedom, but not both. And so we've had a fairly fractious time of it, with state capacity being progressively winnowed. And PD and I are of a shared opinion that part of that winnowing of South African state capacity and industrial capacity was deliberate and at the hands of the establishment, the international establishment.
Okay. Well, the question I have, and perhaps PD, thank you, Nick, you can come in with this, is why are we even talking about South Africa? It's far away. It's not a big player like Russia or China or the US or even Europe. Why? What's the significance of South Africa?
South Africa is hugely significant. It's the gateway to the entire continent. It's such a geographically important place. It's the most industrialized country in Africa. Second to that is Nigeria, but nowhere comes near to South Africa. So it's incredibly important. It used to be the power hub. It still produces the most electricity in all of sub-Saharan Africa. And, the ANC government were handed an absolute jewel. South Africa has the optimum position within all the countries. It should be the leading country for everything, and it isn't. Most African governments now look at the South African government and laugh their heads off because it's such a corrupt mess. Nobody's listening to South Africa anymore because of what they're doing. It has.
Excuse me, PD, can you say something about the resources that South Africa has?
Yeah, look, the resources primarily, going back to what Nick said, the Boer War. The Boer War was fought over the discovery of diamonds and gold. South Africa has a lot of minerals. It has platinum. It has a huge deposit of coal, very, very important, critical for energy. So it has great mineral wealth. Now that mineral wealth has been in the hands of the Anglo-American establishment since the discovery of those minerals. And one could say that really diamonds has a fantastically interesting history in terms of the question people have put forward that diamonds have funded all of Africa's wars, all of Africa's insurgencies through De Beers. I'm not going off the wall and saying that. De Beers is Cecil John Rhodes, Oppenheimer creation, and the diamonds from South Africa. There was proof for this. They have been prosecuted over it, so I'm not sucking this out my thumb.
I think, can I add something there, jump in to add something? It's very interesting that Cecil John Rhodes and his, let's call him his handmaiden, Lord Alfred Milner, were so instrumental in the establishment of that Anglo-American establishment that I mentioned earlier. Their committees ultimately led to the formation of the Fabian Society and this kind of Fabian gradualism approach to the implementation of socialism on a global basis. They were real New World Order people and the first ones to add the formal trappings of institutional elucidation of this grand view of a world socialist government. And it took a great deal of energy from the activities of empire in South Africa, and within decades, was a firmly established force dominating media and education in the United Kingdom and eventually in the whole Anglosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, please carry on, PD.
Yeah, no. So it's very critical to isolate and identify the networks. It's important to understand so many of Africa's wars. In fact, we can just say all of Africa's wars. And it is, as I've said previously, Nick, Rich, we were talking about it. It is all the same war. Wherever you look, it is the same war.
Sorry.
So going back to the diamonds,
more about that. What do you mean the same war everywhere?
So we've got Sudan at the moment. We've got Cabo Delgado, northern Mozambique. We've got Eastern Congo across 3 provinces. We've got Cameroon. Where else have we got? These are just the current ones. I know I'm forgetting somebody. So we've got the jihadists in the Maghreb, the Sahel. So these are one must view those wars as all the same war. They're all the same war to destabilize the continent. Why would you want to destabilize the continent? Because the destabilization weakens government. One of the critical things. So getting back,
that allows cheaper extraction of resources. That's the point. It prevents the African countries from establishing their own industrial bases and beneficiating the minerals that they produce, and establishing, firm middle classes that conduct their own consumption domestically. That's been something that this kind of establishment mindset has railed against for, let's call it 130, 150 years.
Okay, so, and I think we spoke about this, PD, in our video about Ibrahim Traore and Burkina Faso, right? That what these conflicts do, these insurgencies, these prolonged conflicts between different groups, this struggle over resources, is it keeps a sovereign nation weak, because then the government has to target its energy and its efforts and its expenditure towards dealing with conflict versus taking care of the people and developing its own economy and its industrial base and growing a middle class, like you were saying. And the instigators don't want sovereign states, because sovereign states have a greater say over what happens to their resources. So who's behind these instigators? As if I don't know or don't have some idea. Who benefits?
I'll jump in there, Nick, if that's okay. We'll bring it back to now. So, why Trump is targeting South Africa. And I mentioned previously that South Africa is this hub. It's a safe haven. It's where a lot of the terrorist groups launder their money. They raise their money through the criminal underworld, the networks. And they have a strong presence in South Africa, and the South African government are fully aware of their presence. They come across borders quite freely. So getting back to that, so you have Eastern Congo being destabilized by ADF, M23, RDF, the terrorist groups, predominant ones, the largest ones. So this is what's happening currently. There's also a massive amount going on in northern Mozambique, where the world's largest natural gas reserve was discovered in Cabo Delgado, and there suddenly erupted a huge insurgency. That tracks back to a group called Renamo. Now, Renamo, you got Mozambique, during the civil war, horrendous civil war in Mozambique, lasted a very long time, 30 years, I believe. And you had 2 aspiring factions for government. You had Frelimo and you had Renamo. Frelimo are the government in power now, and Renamo, the opposition party. South Africa backed Renamo. When I was growing up, it was common knowledge. Everyone knew South Africa was backing Renamo. So you across on the other side of the continent, Angola, South Africa worked alongside an anti-government force called UNITA, and that was common knowledge. We all knew that South African forces were fighting alongside UNITA against the MPLA government. This was the government brought in after independence. I don't like that word. So the thing is, you see, UNITA were supplying De Beers with diamonds. So De Beers were benefiting from that entire civil war happening in Angola because they were getting really, really cheap diamonds off Joseph Savimbi. So South Africa has always had this extremely negative role within the continent and within the region.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. There's an important thing to add here, which is that the Anglo-American intelligence community, the grandfather of which was MI6 in the UK, leading to the establishment of the OSS and CIA in the United States and Mossad in Israel. That intelligence community has always been very active in African countries, particularly in southern African countries, and so acting through cutout organizations like USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy. They have these sleeper cells all over the place. They have agents all over the place. You can almost like pick them up off the street in Cape Town. There's so many, They act to destabilize when it's convenient to destabilize, to put pressure on governments in situ, and none of the countries in the region are free of that menace.
Right. And so then that menace you're pointing to would be the Western hegemons. Now, it could be that, I know, PD, you think it's the City of London. Nick, you talk about an Anglo-American entity. But either way, they're Western hegemons who are destabilizing Africa, using South Africa as a gateway in order to keep doing that. And South Africa also happens to be a former British colony. So I imagine there's a lot in the way of embedded infrastructure and ties that go back to the City of London, which then, so we have, I suppose, a sort of shadow colonization, a shadow imperialism, no longer direct rule and occupation, but it happens in the corridors of power and behind the corridors of power.
Constant political and economic manipulation, and it's in multiple industries, in multiple regions, and very often funding two sides of conflicts, and resulting in regime change. I mean, PD and I share the opinion that the 2013 event when the third president of the new South Africa, or the third material president, Jacob Zuma, was unseated in favor of Cyril Ramaphosa, that was very much a color revolution. Ramaphosa was really groomed by the family that was central in the formation of the Anglo-American corporation, and also the major owners of De Beers for most of its history, the diamond company. So they were the sort of monopolists of gold and diamond in South Africa. And Ramaphosa was very much an apparatchik of theirs. And what had happened was Jacob Zuma had in many ways started to try to break free from the strictures of the Anglo-American establishment. He wanted to build a nuclear power station, which the country desperately needed a second one of. And he was kind of cuddling up to the BRICS consortium, as PD put it earlier, adding the S to the BRICS consortium. And all of this was threatening, I believe, to Anglo-American interests, and they sought to install at the head of the ANC, and therefore as president of the nation, a person who'd been passed over by Nelson Mandela, who was the first president, and Ramaphosa had been his very natural successor, but he had bypassed him in favor of a man named Thabo Mbeki, who also became a thorn in the establishment side. So 2013 was really an event where we saw plentiful international intervention, especially in the form of really intense monopolization of the media landscape in South Africa by George Soros, the Open Society Foundation, and let's say Open Society adjacent organizations. And there was this very fake upset about white monopoly capital and state capture, which derailed the R1 trillion investment in the nuclear power station and derailed Jacob Zuma, only to give way to Ramaphosa, who recently has announced a R2 trillion investment, not in nuclear power, but in solar and wind operations, which will yield far less than Jacob Zuma's R1 trillion would have. And Ramaphosa's government has been even more corrupt than Zuma's government, but the media have behaved like lambs because all of this activity plays straight into the playbook of suppressing South African growth, suppressing the evolution of a middle class in South Africa, and putting a cap actually on the industrial capacity of the nation.
Right, because you can't run a modern industrial economy on wind and solar.
You need cheap power.
Yeah, you need cheap power, and you need 24/7 cheap power. If you can't run a steel plant on wind and solar power because it would need to be cranked up every single day after it turns off after sunset.
Absolutely, green energy is the new colonialism. It's imposed, and it enables the continuation of a fundamentally extractive geopolitic.
Can I bring Bill Gates in?
We can in a second, but I just want to make this point, Nick. Are you suggesting that the Europeans who exported Christianity to Africa, to Asia, to the Americas, for the good of the people, are now exporting, the continent that has to import hydrocarbons is now exporting the green agenda for the good of their own people, could be doing it for nefarious purposes as a plunder for imperial, as a cover for imperial plunder?
I couldn't agree with that more, and I think that truth hides behind an extremely thin veneer these days. I don't think it's hard to spot it all.
Yes. PD, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to bring Bill Gates to South Africa, right? So we've got Patrice Motsepe, and apparently he's being considered for the next presidency, which would be fascinating. If Patrice Motsepe gets in, then South Africa's on the corporate fascist route for sure. So he is related to Cyril Ramaphosa, and he is the creation of Anglo-Val, who gifted Patrice Motsepe entry into the mining sphere. He was really the face of black mining. It all comes under this legislation, Black Economic Empowerment, B.
And Anglo-Val being a different company from Anglo-American under the possession for most of its history of two families, the Manel family and the Herzog family, but very much one of the monopolistic or oligarchic structures that ruled the South African economy from the 1900s through to you could say the 1990s.
So Patrice Motsepe, he started. He was helped to start AREP, African Rainbow Energy and Power, and AREP was started in 2012 to spearhead the transition to renewable energy in South Africa. So AREP are partnered with, which means backed by, BEV, which is Breakthrough Energy Ventures. Breakthrough Energy Ventures is Bill Gates, George Soros, Mark Zuckerberg, and the rest of the globalist clan. So, it is so clear and obvious to see, isn't it? So you have legislation, you have your Eurocentric energy policies being dictated across the continent onto South Africa. Stop using your abundant coal. You must transition to the green stuff, because we want our mates, the globalist mates, to come in and run your energy sector. So just to quickly put it into perspective, Africa has, we're talking sub-Saharan Africa, it has an incredible energy deficit. It's shocking. It's absolutely criminal. It's criminal how little electricity is generated. So you have got from sub-Saharan down, you have the same, or it has increased, I have to admit, in the last few years, but it's roughly the same energy output as Spain, which is just mind-blowing, okay? 50% of that electricity is generated in South Africa. 80% of the electricity generated in South Africa, roughly, it's changed a bit recently, is from coal. And yet you have the Eurocentric diktats saying, no, stop using that coal and run on solar and wind, which our mates, George Soros, Bill Gates, and all the rest are going to help Patrice Motsepe implement. So it is actually criminal. It's not just the fact that it isn't going to work and you can't run industrial plants on wind and solar. Yeah.
Just to put that into context, sub-Saharan Africa has population of somewhere around 1.2 billion, if official population statistics are accurate, which they probably aren't, but somewhere in that order. And that compares to Spain, who has a population of, less than 50 million. So, it really is, you're talking about, 22 times the population, or there and thereabouts. Using half the energy. So, just imagine that. Imagine using, only being allowed to use the energy that in a whole year that the average Spaniard uses in 2.5 days or something like that. That gives you 2.5% of the year. So maybe 7 a week. The average African gets for the whole year the energy budget of a Spaniard in a week.
Right. Now, PD, you and I can continue. Nick, I know you have to leave, right? I really appreciate you doing this. We're going to carry on talking, PD, now about South Africa. I'd love to have both of you on again at some point, looking at, again, another Africa issue, because I think Africa's growing importance, and why it's of growing importance, it's also full of human beings, and we care about what happens with human beings. So I'll have the links where people can find you. Really appreciate it, and you can leave whenever you need to. I really appreciate you making time for this.
Lovely chatting again to both of you. Thank you.
Yes. So, PD, from what you've said and what Nick has said, what we're actually talking about is a new form of neo-colonialism, one that isn't immediately apparent because it doesn't involve, rounding up natives and putting them into concentration camps or stealing them from their children and putting them into boarding schools and beating them until they adopt Christianity for their own good. But it happens behind the shadows.
Well, it's cloaked, isn't it? It's cloaked in that caring language. And the whole object of the care, the compassion is the planet, environment, and wildlife. But if you look at where in the environment and wildlife are doing best, it's in the most developed countries, isn't it? So go to the panda bear in China, or there was an oryx that was really on the brink of extinction in the Himalayas. It's now thriving. The pandas are doing fine now. So wherever you have increase in the standard of living, you have the welfare of the environment and the wildlife benefit as well. So what they're doing with the green energy policy is they're saying you can't burn your coal, you can't increase your energy output because you're going to harm the wildlife and the nature and the environment, the climate. It will all boil over.
It will. And can I just say that? Because what happens if with burning coal and driving cars and all this is that you increase carbon dioxide. And then what happens with carbon dioxide is it warms up the atmosphere. Now, warmer atmosphere, you have more humidity and more moisture. So now you've got carbon dioxide, moisture, and increased warmth. And in the presence of daylight, well, then what that carbon dioxide plus water plus daylight is photosynthesis, plant growth. And as we know, as modern science tells us, plant growing is really, really bad. Lots of plant growth will kill the planet because then you'll have more food for human beings, you'll have more food for animals, we'll just flourish. If England was much warmer as it was during the Middle Ages, there were fig trees and olive groves in northern England. Because you have milder winters, you have longer harvests. We can't be having that. So there's a little brief science lesson about the dangers of carbon dioxide.
Absolutely.
Please carry on.
No, I mean the Sahel is actually greening, so that is actually proven. There is more moisture.
Well, it just proves my point because of carbon dioxide increasing, right? You get more plant growth, but that's really, really bad.
Well, if we come back to President Obama, when Obama was president. Okay, so in about, I think it was 2012, 2013, I can't remember, he visited South Africa. He went to Cape Town and did his tour there. And he actually said to South Africa, he said, you can't have the lifestyle we have in America, because if you do, the planet will boil over.
Right.
They were almost literally his words. You can't industrialize your economies, because if you do, we are going to have a disaster of all disasters. So look, stand back and look at that, and you think, that is just so outrageous, isn't it? How can you say that? It is imperialism. It's green imperialism. I think, I can't remember the stats quite, but a person in Liberia will effectively boil a kettle 20 times in a year. We do it 20 times a day.
Right.
That kind of thing. You have examples of that across the board. So I think we are winning that war, thanks to Trump saying no. Actually,
what's he doing?
Well,
isn't he just Orange Hitler and out for his own gain?
Well, he's actually given the world a gift in saying that you can burn coal, you can burn clean coal. In fact, there's Hele coal, Hele, and it's the most technologically advanced form of burning coal. It's the cleanest way. I mean, you can burn clean coal, okay? There's a plant in Pakistan, actually, called Sahiwal, and it's a Chinese power station, Chinese-Pakistan joint operation. And they have, you see, it's not the carbon dioxide with the coal, it's the SO2, the sulfur dioxide, which is a toxic gas. And they have engineered a filtration system whereby the sulfur dioxide and the carbon dioxide, for some reason, is completely reduced. So it is possible, as human beings, this is what we are supposed to do. We are supposed to advance technologically. Now, going to wind and solar is not an advancement. It's not going upwards. It's not going anywhere. You look at the size of the battery installations. You have to have these football pitch-sized areas covered in batteries to store the solar. And that is all made from the lithium, the really, really heavy duty mining. So what is the benefit? There really isn't a benefit. You might as well go for nuclear, which in fact has if you don't want carbon dioxide, well, nuclear doesn't have carbon dioxide. It's a green technology.
Yes,
it doesn't produce any.
Once it's built and established, but
it doesn't produce any. Yeah.
Carbon dioxide is plant food, as we established, right?
Yeah.
And then I suppose the advantage of South Africa using its own coal and other nations and Mozambique using its own gas is it allows for self-sufficiency, and then they're not dependent upon the largesse of the Western hegemons, and they're not under the thumb of the Western hegemons. Mozambique could access its gas resources and sell them on to the rest of the African nations that want it, generate income independent of the City of London.
In an ideal world,
In an ideal world, as well as use it for developing its own economy and becoming self-sufficient and resilient. Now, is there any sort of movement like that that's within South Africa, that's impacting South Africa or the rest of Africa, other than, say, Burkina Faso and Mali and, is it Mauritania, where that's happening a little bit?
In South Africa, I think you still have this very negative input of the environmentalists. So these are well-meaning people. They don't seem to get it. The people who are being influenced by the policy of, the Greta Thunbergs. But they are doing it from their own perspective. They are expressing concern and compassion for nature.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are driving it have exactly the opposite agenda. I I always like to bring up one in particular. It's a German foundation called Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, and they have been incredibly harmfully influential in South Africa. It's an NGO, right? And just bear in mind that Merz in Germany, very recently, in the last few days, came out and said that the decommissioning of Germany's nuclear power plants was a really, really bad idea. But then you've got the NGO network, like Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, coming across to South Africa and promoting renewables. So what they did when the second nuclear power, because South Africa has Koeberg. I don't know if you've heard of Koeberg, but it's a massive nuclear power plant. And it was built in, I think it was finished in 1984. It's the backbone of South Africa's industrial capacity. The French, it was with a French design. The French came and they worked together with the government, South African government, and they built Koeberg. And you know, when I was growing up, this is weird, okay? We were so proud of Koeberg. This was like our national treasure. That's how we viewed it. I remember when South Africa sent up its first satellite and how proud we were of that. Look at how we've gone to what the situation is now, where people are absolutely horrified at the idea of nuclear and any scientific advancements.
We have been so harmful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, PD, what you're saying is completely fascinating. Now, your blog is africanagenda.net. I'll have the links in the description below where people can find you. And I urge people to read your articles and also to support you through your Ko-fi link, which I'll also have in the description below. And you're going to come back on again, with or without Nick, hopefully with Nick. We'll work something out and look again at what's happening in Africa. And everybody who's watching, please subscribe, comment, like, and let us know in the comments which country you'd like to look at next within Africa. This is Rich and PD signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.